is never more than one generation from extinction. Think about that. Let it marinate in your mind. Freedom, something that many of us take for granted. Not only freedom, but when I think of freedom, I think of democracy. Democracy, the bedrock of our society, along with freedom. Without freedom, there is no democracy. Without democracy, there is no freedom. Why do we choose freedom over an oppressive government? What makes America, the United States of America, so much better than other governments that are out there? It's not the best, but it's a whole lot better than what we see. But it's what holds us together. It's our Constitution, it's our way of life. So why then do we sit back as we see that freedom, that democracy being chipped away piece by piece, little by little? It started last year, 2020, with the whole shutdown. Many thought, oh, we need the shutdown, it's important. But as the time went on, the benchmark kept moving. First, don't wear the mask, wear the mask. Wear the mask, this thing will go away. Once we started wearing the mask, it became something else. Stay away, go over to grandma's house. Don't go to the gym, don't go to church. Stay at home, be quiet, don't say anything. Don't even visit your neighbors. And if you do see your neighbors breaking the rules, you better tattletale on them. Freedom. What exactly does it mean to you? Now, 2021, we need the vaccine. If we get the vaccine, we can put this thing to rest and we can go back to life as normal. We can enjoy our freedoms again. I don't think so. That's not working. We've got the vaccine, and many states, especially the blue states, don't know how to get it out there. Freedom, democracy. Join us tonight, me, robjh1, and my host, at Small Town Andrew, and our guest, Michael Johns, who is one of the co-founders of the Tea Party and a former speechwriter for the White House. How is it going, gentlemen?
Hello, my friends. Good to speak with you again. Another critical.
Yes. A lot has transpired since our last conversation, but I'm glad to say that we're still here enjoying our freedom and democracy. Where should we start? There's so much to talk about. Michael, tell me, what do you think about the new administration?
Well, I would say, it's off to a very unremarkable, disappointing start. Let me kind of walk through the disappointments that I've seen so far. Number one, you have allegedly, and I say allegedly, 82 million people plus who voted for you across this country, and you draw 1,000 people to the nation's capital just a few weeks after Trump drew, what, 400,000 or 500,000, and a month or two after he drew 1 million. That, to me, is not the signal you want to be sending when you have 47% of the country believing that fraud was a considerable factor in this election. So I'll start with that. Number two, I would say this inauguration speech, which they almost outrageously tried to build and had Senator Chris Coons from Delaware quoted as saying it was the singular most important inauguration speech since Lincoln's, was also notable for being the singular worst inauguration speech ever. I don't believe I've read one. I'm immensely familiar with 20th and 21st century inauguration speeches, and I'm reasonably familiar with those before them. And I did this for a living at that level. This speech was atrocious. I know he used professionals for it. I read the Politico piece on that, but you would never know it. I mean, it lacked. It's a weird profession, but let me just put it this way: it's like any other profession. Like if you had professional body work done on your car, You know, you would walk out to your car and it would look exactly like it was before you dropped it off, right? But if you dropped it off at one of those guys who kind of does this stuff on the side and buys used parts and stuff, it wouldn't be quite right. You would notice it. That's kind of the way this speech writing stuff works. And I looked at it, there, you know, here were the deficiencies were: one, it lacked rhetorical flow. Okay. So you put this guy in front of only 1,000 people who were applauding, like it was a school play or something. I mean, there was literally no one, even with that minimal amount of crowd, certainly the lowest in our lifetime.
Yep.
No enthusiasm for anything that he was saying, and much of what he had to say was contradictory. I mean, let me just start with the fact that he started out trying to win over the hearts and minds, as is not uncommon in an inauguration speech, of those who didn't vote for him, which are just about as many as those who did vote for him. But he then goes on to kind of label those people with all kinds of derogatory adjectives, and which don't apply, and to seek to expand this narrative that somehow they're driven by racial animosity or by extremist factors or by an embrace of violence, none of which anyone who's spent even 5 minutes involved in the MAGA movement knows to be. It's just factually inaccurate.
Right.
It's very contradictory to say, hey, I really want your support. And by the way, here's who we're talking about. So that completely was contradictory. Then you go next was look at the magnitude of issues we confront in the country and around the world. All right. And we could dispute what those are. I would say the leading two are: number one, what are we going to do on this economy, and particularly on one component of the economy, small business, because we cannot be in a position where small business is basically driven out of existence. That's where we're headed with this whole thing. And you're seeing the big box stores once again consolidating power. Where is their main supply chain? I think we all know where that's coming from. And it's coming from the same place that sent us COVID, the China virus. And there's real dangers in having that much of your economy hooked up to large businesses like that, that develop, at least oligopoly kind of market influences, and then also have this China relationship. And we all know, I mean, we went through this when Walmart and others started their expansions in the communities. They all come in and they say they're all about the communities, right? And they are at first, and then they drop their prices, they blow out all the small businesses, and once they're all gone, the next thing you know, your prices are going up. They don't have the stuff in stock. And you got the local cheerleaders outside asking for you to flip them $1 as opposed to Walmart. Right. You ever notice that? I find that the largest company in the world, that I've always found that a little puzzling. And then, I look at all the issues that just simply weren't addressed. I mean, number one, holding China accountable for this pandemic. The word China did not appear in this speech, which is unbelievable. I mean, this is the defining issue from a geopolitical, geostrategic, geoeconomic standpoint, trade standpoint of our lifetimes. Not one word about it. Nothing really about his, while he talked about the pandemic and the cost of it, the human cost, it was all in throwaway cliches. I mean, you didn't really, he was supposed to have this secret recipe, right? That Trump somehow was too stupid to come up with. Well, nothing really there. And if you look at the executive orders that have been signed so far, pretty unremarkable. I mean, mandatory masks on federal property, which he himself has already violated, which kind of, is exactly the message you don't want to be sending. I mean, this either matters or it doesn't matter. So you got Jen Psaki or whatever, who is a complete train wreck at the State Department in the Obama administration. I mean, really one of the singular most ill-informed individuals that they put forward.
And she's back.
And she's back now in a bigger role, and you're going to be seeing her purportedly every day. Boy, the American people are going to tire of that real fast. And I think they're going to tire of this president. I mean, you just don't sense any energy. You don't sense any enthusiasm. I don't think you really sense any authenticity. And it's like, well, what are you really trying to do? Okay, you're trying to unify the country, but look at the things that have been done. I mean, there was no consultation with Republican members of Congress, much less conservatives, much less Trump supporters on any of these initial unilateral actions, almost all of which are destructive to the country. I mean, it takes an axe to the energy industry. Apparently, we're just going to grant, amnesty and citizenship rights and healthcare benefits to those who were bold enough to break our laws. Ponder the absurdity of rewarding the people who broke the laws at the expense of the people who've waited in line. Just that argument alone, plus the fact that we have a labor surplus and we don't need labor right now. We need jobs.
Right.
What was the plan for job creation? Well, I don't think the word jobs appeared in that speech, did it? I mean, I didn't hear it.
No. I mean, I got to tell you, Michael, that I'm bored already. I mean, what has it been, like 2 days? And I'm already bored. I mean, even watching Joe Biden last night when he was talking at the desk and he was rambling, I'm thinking, are you serious? Is this what we have in store for us for the next 4 years?
Absolutely. And it's not even just the boredom, but there he is last night at the Resolute desk, right? One of the most historic desks ever used in the history of the White House, with this mask on, just looking kind of aimless, like he didn't know what to do. I realize these are subjective perceptions. I realize there's a lot of activity, and I realize they're operating on a very serious strategic plan, which is ultimately, as we dissected, going to be very troubling to a lot of Americans and probably almost every voter of Trump. But what's clear is that even among how many votes this guy did ultimately get, I thought yesterday was the opportunity, since apparently there's no interest even on our side in investigating 5,000 affidavits of voter fraud. I mean, seeing it anywhere? I'm not. I mean, I understand the media doesn't want to cover it, but where are the conservative institutions that have taken in billions of dollars talking about their commitment to the Constitution? I'm not saying validate these affidavits or these are emphatically true. I'm saying these are bold citizens who, under a penalty of 5 years incarceration, put their names to allegations that maybe we ought to be looking into. And some, even most of them, are indisputable. You know what I mean? Which I don't know if we talked about. Look, the one example I've been given lately is, like, take Wisconsin. They went out and somehow this private money just arrived, which itself is illegal, okay, for voting processes. And they purchased these voting boxes that they just sort of put all over Madison, Wisconsin. But just by chance, the most radical left region of Wisconsin, of course, that it was completely coincidental. And then, so we have, correct me if I'm misstating anything here, we have counted those ballots that were purchased, they were dropped off in violation of federal law into boxes that were acquired in violation of federal law, on ballots that were cast in federal law, that were counted in violation of federal and state law, and that were certified by the governor of Wisconsin in violation of the state constitution. So, even if the issue is simply one, and of course, all those people who participated in that fraudulent activity, even if it was very benign, even if it was, just some guys saying, hey, look, let's make things a little easier with this pandemic thing. No one who participated in that has been questioned by federal authorities. Nobody's been issued a warning, stern letter. Don't do it again. Nothing.
Right. Nothing at all. And that's what I don't understand.
We literally could talk to this time tomorrow morning about examples. That's what I want to make clear, to those tuning in, is that this is not an issue. And as I pointed out to you guys before, I've never before questioned an election outcome, and I've been involved every cycle for decades now. I've never seen an election with this magnitude of these. And what do you do? I mean, so let's just take Philadelphia as another example. You have all of these ballots, tens of thousands of ballots counted illegally in the absence of Trump or GOP poll watchers. No one disputes that, right? I mean, if they did dispute it, the Biden and Dems would not have sent lawyers into court to resist the enforcement of it. They went into court for a reason. They knew what was going on and they wanted to defend it. How do you just simply throw all those ballots? You say, yeah, the law says we have poll watchers who need to be able to physically, with eyesight, visually observe the counting of these ballots. But, we didn't do it, so we're just going to count it. I mean, and you go through all of this. My back of the envelope math, and I refer people to the Peter Navarro 3 reports Peter Navarro put out. Read those and read the State Attorney General of Texas's filing with the Supreme Court that unfortunately was not heard over standing. But those are very good definitive summaries of all the things that took place. And I think if you're in the Biden camp, this is what I've been pointing out to the I would say mainstream media, but let's say the left side of mainstream media that believes there literally was no fraud and that we're somehow all hallucinating, right? I mean, that is their belief. And you ask them, if you ask them the most basic questions, like, for instance, how many affidavits exist alleging fraud? None. They're not aware of any. There's affidavits. If you ask them, they'll say routinely to mass audiences, and this is going on all over the world, that Trump was defeated in 70 cases in courts. Now, you and I know, right, that of those 70 cases, like well over 60 of them were dismissed on technical or jurisdictional or standing issues. There was no hearing of any evidence. There still has been no hearing of any evidence. The only evidence was heard were in 2 cases where Trump did prevail that I'm aware of. One was the Michigan case where the judge ordered the system from the company's name, I guess we can't mention any longer, be audited, and it found an astounding 68% error rate. I'm not validating those results, simply conveying that's what the independent audit said. Nobody's followed up on that, said, hey, the independent audit's wrong, or yeah, there are errors. We got these systems in 28 states, something like that. And then the other case was in Philadelphia, as you can recall, Judge Alito ordering the separation of these ballots between those that were and were not observed, so they weren't mixed together. By the way, in so ruling, he acknowledged in the highest court in the land that the process followed at the Philadelphia Convention Center was not proper, was not legal, or he would not have ordered the separation. That was the whole basis of the separation. By the way, they just threw them all together anyway. They had literally violated a Supreme Court order, which, I mean, I don't know as far as contempt of court issues if it gets more serious than that, but you wouldn't know it based on any of the findings. And I'm looking around right now because we've been talking, as you guys know, that this is a large conservative movement. We got 70-some million people, and you see the numbers. And even with a media blackout and a social media blackout, where you literally can't even reference these issues or discuss them in an open way, or even solicit, like, because this is my view, and I think it's your view. You guys believe this too. Is that, like, if we're wrong about it, like, correct me. I don't want to be
exactly.
I don't want to push anything that's factually inaccurate at all. It's just shut this whole thing down. And I think when you look at yesterday, the problem is you said with a straight face, you got 82 million people. You limited this inauguration because you knew you couldn't draw a crowd. You couldn't draw a crowd the whole campaign long. This guy used to go over to Bucks County in Pennsylvania. He went a few places. He very rarely left Delaware. I can't recall ever him getting much over 100, 200 people at any one of these campaign gatherings that he did. And then here again, the most important inaugural speech since Lincoln, according to Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. And where are your people? I mean, I'm not expecting 82 million or 8 million or even 1 million, but 1,000 people. And then the other thing is, I'll just leave it at this, not to monopolize this whole thing, but you have, what are the numbers? 25,000 military troops in DC. All right.
More than we have troops in.
Let me just say this. We want the inauguration to be peaceful. We want the transition to be peaceful. That's been a message. The three of us talked about it long. I think even before the Capitol incident, we warned that passions were running high, and we encouraged people, look, the violence is never an answer. And it wasn't an answer. I mean, this hurt our cause. What was done in that Capitol, whoever was ultimately responsible, did not help us. But I don't, like, for the life of me, what are 25,000 military troops doing in our nation's capital? And we have no explanation from this federal government about what they're even ostensibly protecting about. That is an extraordinary number of troops.
Right. I agree. And something else I want to add to that, I'm glad you brought that up, is that 25,000 National Guard troops that are there. And if you recall, this summer, spring and summer, when the President Trump, that is, was saying that he would send out the National Guard and troops, and you have governors and mayors saying, oh, no, you don't. You can't do that. What would that look like? And what is he trying to do? He's trying to take over. So it's like, but now you're okay with it. And from the CIA and the FBI, they say that there was no credible threats. But they were putting out there the narrative that in all 50 states, people are going to be protesting. They're going to try to steal an insurrection. And have you noticed that's all the media talks about? That's their word of choice now, insurrection. The more they say that, and this is what's
I'm sure we're all on the same page about where this is going politically.
And it's unfortunate and very dangerous, because when you have the media saying this nonstop, and big tech has locked down any other voice, and the more you hear this, they will think now, and if you have a conversation with people and you say, that didn't happen, they'll say, no, yes, it did. That is the danger that they're creating. It is extremely dangerous. And this is done by a free press that is not accountable to anyone but the propaganda machine, PR machine of Joe Biden. And I'm saddened by it. I went to journalism school, and I'm like, these people have just broken all the rules. Not that they're journalists, not that any of them went to journalism school. They were just doing this by the seat of their pants. But it's a disservice to American citizens. It is a big disservice.
It's probably a separate discussion for us at some point, but what has happened to American journalism is a very intriguing question to me. And I was really hoping we'd hit the restart button on, kind of the media's handling of coverage after 4 hostile years. And, I mean, literally after the Psaki misstatement on this travel ban, it's like they're all over the place. NBC White House correspondent, the Muslim travel ban has been rescinded. I felt like responding soon. Does that mean I can travel to Indonesia now?
Right.
Because best I can tell, I could travel to Indonesia, the largest populated Muslim country in the world.
These are things that they put out there, pressure points that they put out there that people that will resonate, and they'll say, oh yeah, he did have a travel ban. It's like, no.
Information voters, and I'm not disparaging them, because who has the time really to follow all this stuff, if you're not involved in it. And you hear Muslim travel ban, they're like, Trump's banning Muslims. Well, in reality, I could rattle off the largest populated Muslim countries were not affected. And by the way, nor was it a ban. Right. That was another lie, because the biggest lie is that it was Muslim. It was suspensions, temporary suspensions. They augmented the laws. They required additional documentation. They made a few adjustments, and it was all to protect the American people after incident after incident of Islamic terrorism in this country. And I'm telling you, having been to many of these, all these regions of the world, that there are countries, including the 7 main ones that Trump put on that list, which actually were developed in the Obama administration, by the way, where they do not have documentable processes for the backgrounds of many of these individuals.
Right.
Let's assume somebody is an al-Shabaab militant figure in Somalia. I'm telling you, the central government in Somalia has no formal means of even pretending to know, aside from maybe high-level leadership, who has and has not been engaged in that sort of thing. Right. So how would we roll the dice and just let those people in here? I mean, it makes sense to me. And of course, 2 of the countries involved, Venezuela and North Korea, have negligible Muslim populations. I guess, that doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. I mean, because like I said, they put this out there. Something else I want to talk about. What did you guys think about during the inauguration? This guy right here, Bernie Sanders.
He and I are born on the same day, September 8th. I share
Really?
every year with him. Yeah, my buddy Bernie.
Well,
probably quite a few years after Bernie was born, though, right, Michael?
Yeah, a couple years. Honeymoon in Moscow, and he's a piece of work. But I'll tell you something. I mean, and I think I wouldn't be shocked if you guys agree with me completely. Don't you have a little bit more respect for him ultimately than this Democrat establishment that'll just do anything? I mean, it's like, here's my set of principles.
Mm-hmm.
I took my honeymoon during the Cold War in the Soviet Union. Yes, I am a socialist. I believe in socialism. Socialism is not a bad thing. Now all of a sudden we can have a conversation. And my feeling with Bernie Sanders and his vast supporters, and I'll tell you, he would have a lot more than 1,000 people on the mall at the Capitol if he were being inaugurated. There'd be, he'd have 500,000 plus. He'd match a Trump crowd. He's got a base of supporters, and we have, if you're looking for unity, I'm more encouraged by that unity potential on a few issues, maybe, than I am with anything I'm seeing out of this administration so far. I mean, I'm seeing a steamroll effect, and I'm going to tell you something. We'll talk in great detail about it, I'm sure. But heading into this Senate impeachment, this has got to be, and this is, I guess I'm just sort of coming around to this conclusion today as I've been thinking about it. This is the Republican Party of the 21st century defining what it is. And I'm going to tell you that if you vote to impeach this president, saying that he incited that violence, knowing that Antifa was involved and BLM was involved and that Trump opponents were involved and that the people who had instigated it were there before Trump even spoke, and knowing that the incident had been planned for 2 weeks, making it therefore impossible that the speech could have incited that. If we're going to do that, I am telling you the temperament of the politics of this country. And, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but one thing I've done over the last decade is I have had the temperature of the American people. And it was one of the, when I was laughed at, and Coulter and others were laughed at too, on the embrace of Trump. But I saw that that's where it was going. And if you were going through middle America, you could see it. And I'm telling you right now, Republicans who vote to impeach Donald Trump are going to earn extraordinary animosity from the American people, and they can bank on primaries, and they can probably bank on losing them. And I don't care how much money you bring, because Tea Party movement, look at Eric Cantor, how much money he brought to his Virginia race. Look at Michael Castle, how much money he brought to his Delaware race. You reach a point where you can run your TV ads all day and all night. People are going to lose confidence in you. And when you put these swamp-like agenda ahead of objective facts, and we know, don't we, that this guy was not trying. I mean, how would that possibly have advanced his agenda to see that level of violence? And then what happened as soon as it happened, by the way? Can we walk through that as well? Because unlike the BLM and Antifa street riots that killed over a dozen, 19, I think was the last count, individuals, I think, including a few kids, and cost $2 billion of damage in property. Trump immediately tweeted, hey, peacefulness. And then when that didn't work, he immediately was on with his video saying, hey, look, get out of there and respect the 6 p.m. Curfew. And then that was the end of it, basically. I mean, those people weren't drawn out of there by force for the most part. So the whole thing's absurd, and it's based on the fact that they did not want to allow Donald Trump to leave Washington, D.C. feeling comfortable, or feeling that he had accomplished anything, or feeling that he had a future in American politics. And the message is also to everyone else, which is where you're going with this whole thing, that anybody else has this crazy idea of coming in here and draining the swamp, you can expect similar treatment.
Right. Michael, what do you say to people who are worried about all the establishment Republicans that we have? Like Mitch McConnell says that we're going to delay the impeachment until February, or at least that's what he's pushing for. And he hasn't even made up his mind yet on which way he's going to vote. How key is it in primaries we get some America First candidates out running for office?
Firstly, this impeachment, we were told in the House of Representatives by those who voted for it, needed to be done yesterday because we could not trust Trump in the Oval Office for even one more day, right? That was the argument. You pull up quote after quote of what they said. He was a danger to the Republic, which was absurd. But now the Senate realizes that maybe they weren't, and the House, that they weren't quite as strategic with this whole thing as they thought they were. They weren't quite as bright as they thought they were, because this venue that he is now going to be afforded constitutionally is going to afford him a basis to put on evidence. And I do understand that there are some constraints and question marks about the magnitude of that evidence. But in this particular case, when your main allegation is that your statements that the election was fraudulent and that you won a sizable victory, that's Trump's statement, not me. I don't have any conclusion except that these allegations need to be investigated. When you're saying that statement that he made inflamed that violence, whether or not that statement is or is not true, then becomes a core component of the Senate trial and allows the president to put on the exact sort of evidence that he was unable to put on in the courts because of standing and jurisdictional objections, and was unable to put on really before most of the state legislatures because governors just wouldn't call these guys into session. And if you hear Navarro and you hear Giuliani talk about the reaction that they've gotten from the state legislatures, this is one of the most persuasive. These are two honorable men, in my view. I mean, if somebody's got a different view on that, I'm open to hearing it. But I grew up watching Rudy Giuliani closed down the 5 mob families in New York City and followed his career in the Department of Justice. And this is an admirable man, in my judgment. He's not in the business of lying. He had no agenda. In fact, I think I heard that Trump's not even paying his legal bills, and that was one of the things I heard. So, I mean, his agenda here seems to be one of principle, and I don't, for the life of me, understand why. If you start putting this evidence on, it's not going to start to move those numbers that are 47 up to 50, up to 55, up to 60, up to 65. At some point, you create a sort of ungovernable situation. I mean, what percentage of the American people can endure with a president that we know that what is that number where it ultimately becomes unsustainable? I mean, that was kind of the question on impeachability itself, and the politics of impeachability is what could Trump's unfavorables actually be at, to the point where he could be exonerated in that absurd Ukraine allegation where he did no wrong. But we all acknowledge it was a political vote. Well, he was, in the upper 40s, and that was enough to get him out of it. But I'll tell you, if he had been in like the low 30s or something like that, the vote could have gone very differently. And that's the sad reality of this whole thing. We got a lot of problems in this system. I don't know, that Churchill quote is escaping me right now about democracy being the worst form of government except for all the others that have ever been tried. That's kind of where we're at right now. I think it's easy right now to look at the world and say, yeah, I'm sure that, in Beijing, they're getting a big belly laugh out of this whole thing. It's utterly hysterical. Iran has already mocked us. But you know what? There's only 2 ways to run a government. You have a government that's accountable to the people, selected by the people, and you try to do that the best that you can. And it's increasingly difficult in a population as large as ours, and with people that are malicious, malevolent with intentions. Or you let, dictators run things. And that latter option is not an alternative for the American people, and it can never be an alternative for us.
Right. So it's like, do they have that much hate that they want to just keep going after the president? I mean, he's out of office. According to the Constitution, you impeach to and then convict to remove him from office. But it's like he's out. So where would this go?
because there's nothing more powerful than the people united behind a cause and a person. And that's what has scared them from the very beginning, because every one of these guys, just like Biden, couldn't get more than a few hundred people. You could show up in Louisville, Kentucky, and, you know, for a McConnell, you know, open door meeting, and you're going to have a few dozen people there. I mean, this guy's got nothing, anything he's had to say, people have heard already. And, you know, they kind of accept what it is, as they say. I mean, it's like a guy who's, you know, part of the swamp, and he raises the boatload of money, just like Chuck Schumer does, just like Nancy Pelosi does, just like less so, but still notable, Kevin McCarthy does. And these guys are not idea people.
Right.
They're fun. These are money people, man. I mean, when you look at like, what's the ultimate skill set? Like, assume you took them out of Congress and you had to hire them to go do some other job. They're fundraisers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about, what's her name? Cheney.
Liz Cheney.
Yes.
I guess the House has got to decide where they're at. I feel the same way about it. I mean, there's just absolutely no basis to have said those. I mean, that was really the inflammatory rhetoric, what she had to say about the president. And there's so many assumptions, and they're all wrong. And now new information is coming out, and she's already got like 2 or 3 primary challengers arising out in Wyoming, and she's in trouble. I mean, I'll tell you one, and I'm close to this situation. All right, I mean, I've talked to people out there. I'm talking to people out there, and here's one of the reasons she's in trouble. It's not just the position that she took, but very pompously, she never took the temperature of the people of Wyoming on this issue. She just boldly went, kind of in the direction, clearly, in my judgment, influenced to some degree by her dad's hostility to Trump on this. And people are like, no, that's not where we're at. And you're our representative in Washington. You're not representing us with that position.
And I wonder also if when the president had said, we need to primary her, was that like the tipping point for her? And she just decided, okay, he said that about me during this on January 6th. So I'm going to immediately, because she was the first to come out running saying, yes, I would vote to impeach and convict. Thinking, wait a minute, because during the first impeachment, she was kind of timid, but she was against it. And now she's coming out so strong. So Michael, let me ask you this. Is it possible, knowing what we know about this impeachment, which to me is completely, wrong, as well as the first one, can the president be absolved of an impeachment? Can someone else be elected president and they say, we're looking at this and we're going to absolve the president of these impeachments? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need 67 votes to convict, and that's a tall order. But
to remove from his record the impeachment itself, can they undo an impeachment?
Yeah, they need
say that we're done.
They're going to need over 2/3 in the Senate to get that done. And that's going to require, the math. I mean, that's going to require a good number of Republicans. But the bad news is there are some Republicans out there that are concerned. I mean, I feel this is an entire political undertaking. And if it weren't this, I honestly got to tell you, I think it'd be something else. I think there's a lot of things we don't know about that incident. We've talked about some of them. It was a hybrid of individuals. That's now clear, and it was pre-planned. Which, as I said, I mean, if the way I worded it today, as I said, if this were a court of law and a Senate trial is presented as being something resembling a court of law, even though this high crimes and misdemeanors part of the Constitution is somewhat not completely or it could be better defined. There's a lot of subjectivity within it. But you would go in there and say the allegation is that this speech on January 6th inspired this violence. We now found out that the people who planned this violence planned it 2 weeks before the speech. And you would have a judge who would issue a summary judgment and dismiss the case. End of story, period. There's nothing else to even talk about. Now here there will be, and they'll say, well, he laid the groundwork for it, but one of their arguments is going to have to be that these allegations were false of what Trump said. And maybe they're right. I'm going to look forward to hearing their arguments, because honestly, we haven't heard their arguments, and that's been one of the things I've said. Is I said, spare us the unifying rhetoric in that Biden inauguration speech. If you wanted to unify the country, you take the one thing that's most divisive right now, which is half the country questioning his validity as president right now, and he would put out maybe his own report. This is what I've suggested. I mean, if I were on their team, I'm not just saying this, like I'm telling you, I would advise him to do this if I were on the Biden team. I would say take the Navarro report and take the Senate, take the Texas AG filing with SCOTUS, and do a point-to-point rebuttal. All right. So if actually all of those poll watchers were really in the Pennsylvania Convention Center in Philadelphia, that they didn't really close it down overnight, if there weren't drop boxes put out in Madison, Wisconsin, if all these Dominion things were the best systems known to man, make that statement and then allow a process to go forward. I mean, there has to be some resolution to this. And it is immensely frustrating to me that the people, the responsible leadership in what we call our conservative movement, liberty-minded, constitutionally based people, not even talking about partisan people, who should be arising right now to say that there is a danger in letting this unresolved, are making the exact opposite argument. They're arguing that there's a danger in trying to resolve it. What happens if we dive into these things, which, by the way, is not going to happen. I don't think I would be here saying, taking a lead in this issue, saying that there's nothing here if I felt there were nothing here. There's stuff here. All right. I don't know the magnitude of it is in question, but there are very serious process violations, very serious fraud. And if you just let that linger, and nobody's held accountable, and the country remains split 50-50 on whether it was or wasn't a fraudulent election, including what's the number on the Democrats? It's like 15-18%. It's not a small number. I think that's the biggest disservice to representative democracy that anyone could provide.
Exactly. So it just begs the question as to why are they so resistant? I mean, in 2016, they were so against the president. They said that he didn't win from day one. He didn't win. They started talking about the impeachment. And I think right now a junior senator freshman senator rather, from Georgia has introduced articles of impeachment. I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't know if they're going to just slap it down, but I mean, I want peace. Because
they're terrified, Rob. They're terrified of what it's going to show. I mean, is there any other possible explanation? I mean, you get 11,000 unconfirmed dead voters in Georgia. What's the spread in Georgia? It's like 11 to 12,000. I mean, it's like that alone. Just adjust that, and Georgia's in Trump's column. You have Pennsylvania, 8,000 confirmed dead. You got Nevada, which is also really tight. I think last I looked was 4 or 5 of people that no longer lived in Nevada but voted. You get these ballot mishandlings. How do you handle that issue? How do you handle the chain of command? Does this matter at all? Do we not care about it any longer? Do we just let people sort of take thousands, tens of thousands in some cases of ballots and sort of drive around wherever they want to do and be allowed in singular possession of these ballots? That's certainly not what the state laws say in these states. And yet it sure looks like that's where our leaders are as far as letting this stuff go on. Michigan, you got polling location after polling location. Said, no voter ID, don't worry about that. All the changes they made to the signature verifications without ever going through the state legislatures. Do we just sort of say, hey, you make up your own laws, whatever works for you? That's the society we want to live in.
And then for me, having judges to intervene and make decisions were clearly, they were completely out of their lane. It was the job of the state legislatures. And that in itself, is a big issue. And I hear people saying, well, it's no big deal. I'm like, but they went against the law. It is the state legislatures that are supposed to make decisions. But, you know, we, like you said,
these are crimes. Okay. So it's like, let me give you just another, and then, like I said, we go on for hours. Let's take Dane and Milwaukee counties in Wisconsin. You had these indefinitely confined cases, right? This too is indisputed. These individuals didn't have state ID, so they couldn't do their traditional mail-in ballot, and were advised, and there's affidavit after affidavit validating this to say, you'll just file it like you're in a nursing home or an assisted living facility, or you're in the hospital. And these guys were off, some of them were like off skiing in Colorado. Again, the question just arises, not this, I want to get this off. My question is not, do you want Trump or do you want Biden? My question is, do you want to let abuses like this be broadly known throughout the country, that they are tolerable and that there'll be no recourse, no accountability, not even, hey, next time don't do that? Because I'm not seeing any degree of that. 70,000 ineligible voters in Georgia. 70,000.
Yep, that's true. Now, something else I want to ask you about, Michael, what are your thoughts on this entire silencing other opinions that don't agree with yours, blacklisting in essence? You have these, I think, publishing companies saying don't publish anything that's coming out of the White House. And a lot of people that are pushing this are millennials, the young people that are working at these publishing companies, with these jobs, big techs that are saying, hey, we don't want to hear from this, we don't want to hear from that. And it's extremely dangerous. And for the media, including Fox, not to jump on this and say, this is wrong and this is why it's wrong. The only thing they're saying is, oh, they don't want this person to publish a book and they don't want this person. I'm like, but why? Explain why this is dangerous. And no one seems to have the appetite to explain that.
To the other side, I guarantee you I would have a problem with it. I would be on, if this were, say, happening to Obama administration officials and they were being closed out of mainstream institutions or opportunities to present their views, I would be on here with just as much passion as I have on this, telling you that that's wrong. But this is the cancel culture. How about the ultimate irony of Simon and Schuster, I believe it was, canceling the book on the cancel culture? Did you know? I mean, does like somebody ponder and say there's a little that did someone write irony? I mean, this author puts together a apparently a pretty widely anticipated book about the cancel culture, and then the cancel culture actually attacks Simon and Schuster, says you can't release that book, and it gets canceled. We can't live in a society like that, or it's going to, I talked to, I don't think he'll mind me sharing this. I hope he won't mind me sharing this information, but I have a few people I turn to, the wise men, the people who I sometimes get ideas I hadn't thought of. And I talked to Dinesh D'Souza for about a good chunk of time a couple weeks ago. And I'll tell you his position. And one thing about him, whatever you think about him, he has had foresight. I mean, he was talking about political correctness before anyone even heard what that phrase was. He was talking about what was going on. If you read his book, Illiberal Education, it is the best forecast of where he saw academia going before. If you read The End of Racism, he had some very, very important and credible points to make about the identity culture in this country and how detrimental it was and how it was hurting everyone. But he says, look, he says it's game over. He says the academia, business, media, and the question is ultimately, is it even geography? It is being forced into one of these two camps, that there's not, sadly, in his judgment, and I'm not endorsing this, I'm simply saying this is a guy who history I have found, he's one of the most successful nonfiction authors and documentarians of our time. And he says that basically we slept for decades while this insurrection, the real insurrection, happened, which was, the takeover of secondary education, the takeover of academia, the takeover of Hollywood, the takeover of media. And I'm talking, like, we're talking about systematic. It's not like you're saying, hey, 75% of these media personalities are Biden fans. It's the couple outlets we know that are still holding their ground, smaller outlets too, and every major corporate media outlet is basically chosen sides. They chose sides against Trump, and they're choosing sides with Biden. And it's tough not to think there's a bigger agenda here that goes beyond really the profession itself, and to the point of what kind of country we're going to be and how we're going to fit into the rest of the world.
Yeah. Michael, I think a lot of us predicted that the Democrats would start to reopen the economy once President Trump got out of office and try and inflate Joe Biden's job numbers and make them look good right off the bat. And we've been seeing just that in New York, and I live here in Illinois. A lot of things are opening up now all of a sudden. What do you think of Joe Biden's economy, maybe not a couple months from now, but a couple years from now, with some of these policies he's already putting into place, like getting rid of the Keystone Pipeline, re-entering the Paris Climate Accord, and basically going to let illegals flow into our country? I don't see that working long term. How about you?
Nor do I see it being politically popular. I mean, firstly, you take the economic impact of all these developments. I mean, Keystone is a huge employer, and it's a huge employer in an area geographically in this country where it's not like there's similar jobs down the street. So these people, many of them are middle-aged and spent a large percentage, of their livelihood and careers developing these very niche-related specialties. If I were Biden and I really felt, hey, Keystone is going to destroy the environment beyond recognition and survivability and has to be closed yesterday, if that were my view, which it isn't, I at least would take the moment to address the thousands of people whose jobs are going to be lost, and the millions of Americans who are, throughout all these energy policies, going to be paying a lot more in gasoline prices and electricity, and say, here's what we're going to do for you. But there's never even any offsetting consideration of the impact these people have on the people their policies affect. I mean, it's like they don't even think about it. It's like, and why would they think about it? They don't know these people. You and I know that. We all know that. That's why Trump won in 2016, and why he might have won in 2020 as well. Is that those people felt correctly that this man had their back, that he understood their needs, their fears, their aspirations, and how politics and government was aligning itself in opposition to the kind of country they wanted and the kind of life they wanted. And I think that's just really problematic. And then to go on from that, I mean, illegal aliens, we don't even know how many there are. I mean, just start with the craziness of that. Is there any country in the world that manages immigration? We don't manage immigration. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't believe I'm misstating this. This was I worked with Tom Kane, who went on to chair the 9/11 Commission report. If you look at the 9/11 Commission report, there were a number of conclusions that came out of that report. One of them was about overstayed visas. This is one of the few countries in the world, it might be the only country in the world, where you can literally fly in here from wherever, never leave, and nobody ever knocks on your door and says, hey, that 90-day visa you had expired a month ago or whatever. I mean, there's literally no policing of the legal visitation visas, right? Then you get into the H-1Bs, and we've all talked about that, the fact that what a scandal that is. And hey, look, Donald Trump, I want to be straight up about this, because you know what? He would be straight up about it if he were in our shoes. You said you were going to get rid of it. You didn't. In fact, you had Mike Lee and others in the Senate that are conniving to expand the program. This program is corrupt. it is not providing what it was supposed to be. The argument when H-1B was rolled out originally was that there were these hugely unique skills that we literally could not find anywhere in the country, right? And so we had to go to, you know, Kashmir or something and bring people over here who did have those skills. Well, on the surface, when that was presented, I heard it and I go, wow, these must be some really refined skills. And if we have to go abroad to get those people, that makes sense to me. Then it started to turn out, well, you know, you actually had all these employees who were being forced to sign non-disclosure agreements when these H-1B visa employees arrived, that they knew absolutely, in some cases, nothing about the jobs that they were about to assume, and that they were being trained by these American workers who, in exchange for signing these non-disclosures, these NDAs, were given pretty lucrative severance packages and were told never to talk about it. And as you well know, back in 15 or 16, a few employees from Walt Disney and some other entities came forward and said, look, this is what's going on. Big business has tried to suffocate the voices of these individuals to keep this basically a secret also from voters who aren't following this stuff. But this is a scandal to American workers. And it would be a scandal in a normal economy, and a scandal with millions of people displaced because of COVID. We have no need for that. What were the other issues? So yeah, on the travel ban, I think I addressed that, right? I mean, to have a Secretary of Homeland Security testify in confirmation hearing that may or may not tear down the wall that was partially built by President Trump. Can we just do a cost benefit analysis on that? I mean, you know, it costs money to build a wall. It also, I assume, costs money to tear a wall down. Why in God's name would we be tearing down a wall? I mean, I think like right there, this is where the American people get frustrated, because I think if they're sitting in that confirmation hearing, they're like, you know, I think we've heard enough. No, we'll bring us another candidate. I mean, and there's literally no southwestern border security plan that I'm seeing. They're going to put the same people down there that are going to do very little, frankly. They're not going to put in place any physical construct that prevents these people. And you've seen, hopefully you've seen these videos, thousands of immigrants lining up in anticipation of Biden's inauguration, sprinting through Guatemala, Honduras, you know, and all the way up. I mean, so this surge that we used to experience pretty regularly during the Obama years is back. These were all the things that the American people had had enough of. They're now being thrust upon them once again.
Yeah. Michael, we got a question from Twitter here. It's quite a loaded question, but I guess just answer it however you can. This guy, Jeff Bernard 1, wants to know, how will we beat the left in 2022? What can we do right now to resist Biden? What legal steps can we take, and how do we proceed? And how do we support the right primary candidates to win? So quite the loaded question there, Michael, but answer it however you see fit.
I kind of approach these things two ways, sometimes instinctually, and in some ways, like, here's the body of like research and evidence that I've put together. Like, so when I get engaged formally in campaigns, I bring the evidence, you know. So I'm going to have to give you my speculation. And my speculation is that Trump has changed everything in an almost universally positive way within the party. All right. He's put trade, immigration, many of these issues I've just spent 15, 20 minutes talking about. These were not issues, you know, whatever you think of Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Jeb Bush, you know, they're all honorable men. They weren't gonna die on that hill on those issues. And it's one of many reasons that Trump got the pushback he got, because he did force these issues that elites in this country were benefiting from. I mean, they want cheap labor. Can we just state that? I mean, that's what this thing's about. And they want Democrat votes, which they think a largely welfare dependent, non-English speaking, Central Latin American immigration body is going to be needing. That's the politics behind it. I think we come back with lessons of the Trump agenda of 16, maybe some lessons learned about what wasn't done well in the last 4 years. And you know my position on that. I think they I think, I didn't talk extensively about it because I didn't really see any need to talk publicly about it. I didn't think it would be helpful to the president or the country. But a lot of bad hires. How many books have been written by former Trump employees trashing this president? How do you have anonymous sitting at the right hand of the Secretary of Homeland Security who's got jurisdictional authority basically over immigration and the law and all sorts of other issues central to the MAGA agenda, going in every day, undermining Trump? Nobody, did anybody, why would you not have taken a look at the people who supported you in 15 and 16? Who also had experience? Those are the people that you should have brought in day one. One of the first hires he made is Reince Priebus. Okay, went to law school where I went to college. Again, decent guy. I'm sure he's got his capabilities, but he's an operational political figure. He didn't believe in any of this stuff. He didn't believe. I'll tell you what, I will guarantee you, because I can recall back when they did the post-mortem after Romney's defeat, that he felt that Romney alienated Hispanic voters in his support for the wall. Hey, turns out Hispanic voters feel as passionately as any other Americans over this whole thing, and some of them feel very passionately over it because they left these countries to get away from MS-13 and drugs and poverty and corrupt governments. And they certainly don't want to see that stuff imported into this country. So immigration and trade have to be at the forefront. We got to continue to honor this. We're going to have to put together projects to honor this president. Things should be named after this president. We did this with Reagan, but it took an effort because nobody was just getting around to it. We said, no, we want the airport in Washington, D.C. named after Reagan. And we've had success on this. I tried to get the airport in Philadelphia named after named after Ben Franklin, which I thought was the most logical thing in the world, but it's an unnamed airport, because the Democrats just don't want to throw some props to a founder who was from Philly. But I think we're going to have to resonate with working men and women, with low and middle income workers. I think we have to take a whole fresh new look at who the voting base is. We have to continue to expand our support in Hispanic and African American communities, and not the way that we've been doing it though. We need to do some listening. I think we should be going into urban communities, not saying, hey, we have these enterprise zones and we got school choice. All these programs may ultimately be where we end up, but it's got to be a collaborative environment. It's got to be a collaborative approach, and it can't be arrogant. You got to go into like West Baltimore and you say, look, you've had these Democrats running this place now for 50, 60 years. Your schools are a mess. You got drugs on every street. You got crime everywhere. You have hopelessness, depression, mental health problems, healthcare access issues, no employment, no jobs, broken families. I mean, go on and on. Like literally nothing's working. Government services are broken and they're overstretched because, it's just logical economics. You can't blow up an economy and expand dependency and expect that you're not going to bust a municipal budget. Their bonds get downgraded and they end up with, serious problems. And that's what's happening in a lot of these. That's why some of these municipalities are, literally have declared bankruptcy. They don't have fiat currencies like the federal government. They got to pay for this stuff. So I think you go in there and you say, look, we're a party too. Here's our party. We, started basically out of opposing the exportation of slavery into the Midwest in the 19th century. And we had this guy who was named Abe Lincoln, who was our first president. And here's some of the things that we've done. We had this guy named Ronald Reagan, fourth president of the United States, who's pretty widely considered to have won the Cold War. And we care about what's going on here. And we think we can do a better job, but we want to know how to do a better job. And you have those sort of conversations. And we're not going to get 100% of that vote, 90% of the vote, 80% or 70%, but it doesn't have to be, like upper, it doesn't have to be that we're like registering under 10% of the vote. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's like we're not even running seriously. I was glad to see a lot of solid candidates who ran very difficult races and lost in some of these communities, including a lot of great African-American candidates. But honestly, I don't really care even about the ethnicity. This is my own view. I don't care about the ethnicity, gender of these candidates. I was like yesterday when we were saying this is the first female vice president in the history of the United States. All right, there's one more. I mean, check it off, I guess. I don't know. Is is your life better today because of that? I think we've proven that women have abundant opportunity, and if there's anything impeding their ascent in this country, it's illegal and should be removed. But I mean, they're well represented in corporate America. There's been a lot of focus on that properly. Boards are being represented. Look what's going on with NASDAQ right now with their diversity mandates on their boards. And in government, I mean, we just came out of an administration that had an extraordinary number of women on the cabinet. I mean, how many women did Trump have on the cabinet? It was a big number. I mean, and
help them win.
And some of his closest White House advisors. I mean, but at some point, it's like you just get the best people. I mean, because they're not unique to one gender or ethnicity or religion or anything else, sexuality or anything.
I've got one more question for Michael, and then Rob can follow up.
That's a big statement what I just said there, by the way. I mean, I know it's common sense, but it's a predicament that we're in that you can't just sort of like acknowledge that we're not, sexist, we're not racist, we're not homophobic, we're not looking to impede anyone, we're looking to lift people up. That's the agenda here.
Absolutely. One more question for Michael on my behalf is a woman, Louise Gibson in the chat room asked it. I'm sure you've seen these rumors of the Patriot Party and President Trump starting his own party because a lot of people feel like a lot of the Republicans like Mitch McConnell, who we talked about earlier, aren't really representing their values. You've got a lot of experience in the past with the Tea Party and electing great America First candidates. I believe we talked about this a little last time, and you believe that the solution is to fix what we have in the Republican Party because third party just divides the vote too much and historically does not work. What are your thoughts on the Patriot Party, Michael?
I love the name, and I think there's a certain percent. Firstly, this has a lot of momentum, so I'm not disparaging anyone who's out there with this idea. Hey, your ideas are welcome. I'm glad you're thinking about our future. That's what we need right now. Don't be pulling the comforter over your head, fearing that it's the end of the country or the end of your future in the country. We're not going to get anywhere with that. That's how a lot of people felt back in 2009. Boom, came the Tea Party movement. Took the House, and that was game over for Barack Obama. We took 1,000 seats head to head with that guy. Let the record show that. It doesn't get reported enough. We beat that guy at every corner, and we beat him in races where they outspent us, and I'm quite sure cheated in some cases there too. Because our ideas were better, our candidate recruitment was better, our block-to-block organization was better, and we had captured the imagination of the people. That's what we need to do, basically again this time. So I mentioned that laudable history of the founding of the Republican Party in Ripon, Wisconsin, because in the ideal world, you would have leveraged that in the brand identity of the party. But how many Americans really know that? How many Americans really know that history of the statute that the party arose to oppose, and the role that that Lincoln was in many ways the founder of this party, one of many, but was obviously the first head of state. How many Americans know that Lincoln was a Republican? How many Americans know that Republicans championed civil rights legislation in the 20th century, and that how many people know that Hillary Clinton's mentor was a KKK officer, Robert Byrd? I worked in the Senate when that guy was there. I was like, what a different world. And now, and let me be fair about it, because the guy he did come forward and go, hey, look, I made a big mistake, blah 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 blah. But how many people have you heard say those things after misspeaking or doing something stupid, and they're not forgiven in this environment. That guy, Joe Biden, by the way, went to, and you can look this up because I read the eulogy he gave. He went down to Charleston, West Virginia, I think it was in Charleston, West Virginia, to speak at the funeral of Robert Byrd, a KKK, not just member, but a sort of regional leader.
I think he was like a grand wizard or something.
I think that's what it wasn't, because I can recall someone saying that. It's a grand something. You can tell I'm not very familiar. I've never met anyone in the KKK, so I know very little about it. Have you guys ever met anyone? I mean, is it, it's like when I started hearing about these Proud Boys, I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know these guys, so I'm not disputing the fact that, as Biden said, that, that violent political instincts, even on the right, are a legitimate issue in this country. Don't want to see it. I know three of us, we want to play our role in trying to say to those who are pondering maybe some sense of hopelessness at this moment that is not a solution. Please do not do it. It's not going to help. It's going to be destructive to you. It's going to be destructive to other people. It will not work. And it will set the cause back. But we do have to have solutions. And I think this question gets to the solution. So here's my bottom line. I think two right of center parties split the right of center vote. We just proved that the Republican Party alone, one singular party, was not enough to win a presidential election. And you split, and I think Trump might be looking and referencing it, thinking, I can maybe take 70%, make it 70-30, and add in the independents and some Democrats and have something that actually does, for the first time, create a viable third party. But if you actually go through and even look, as I pointed out to you guys previously, in the 2020 election, the libertarian candidate, who no one knew anything about, this Clemson University professor, came in and logged serious numbers in some of these swing states, and it had a tangible effect on a few of the election outcomes. So it can be a real problem. And I will tell you that a lot of the people coming forward talking about the third parties have not taken the first step of trying to get involved in the Republican Party, which is really what I think is the first step. I mean, this can be done, getting involved and getting a leadership role in your local Republican Party. Trust me, it's a lot easier than it might seem. There's not a lot of barriers to entry. They're constantly actually looking for people and officers. And, you build that up. And I like the Sarah Palin example. She was Wasilla, Alaska, and she was concerned about her kids and the schools. And, people in Wasilla came and said, hey, we can tell you're really sincere about education. Will you run for, school board? And she did that and did a great job. And I'm not sure if she actually was president of the school board. I don't want to misrepresent, but then it was finally they needed a mayor for Wasilla, right? And guess whose door they knocked on again? Hey, you did a good job on the school board. Can you help us as mayor? Next thing you know, she's governor. Next thing you know, she's drawn the attention of McCain and his political posse, and she's vice presidential nominee of the United States. That path may seem impossible. It's not. I think what you do is a good job as you kind of move through these ranks. If you do it in the Republican Party, you get involved, you make your county one of the better ones in that state, maybe the best one in that state, instead of outreach and the candidate recruitment, all the mechanics of politics. And then, it's going to get noticed, and they're going to come out and seek, in state leadership, or you pursue it. And then ultimately, look at this election we just had with Ronna McDaniel, whatever you think of her. I mean, did anyone even run against her?
Right.
Do we have any national discussion about whether of 330 million people in the country, whether she and she alone was the singular person to lead this party in the post-Trump era? I don't recall anything go.
Mm-hmm.
She's never called. I'll tell you one thing: she's never called me, and I'm not her. But if I were her, I would have me on my call list.
Right.
And a bunch of other people that I know she hasn't called.
Now, Michael, one final question here. Something that you were saying, that you mentioned briefly when you were explaining the different things about Trump and, the movement and whatnot. We were saying, recognizing what this president has done, this president being Donald John Trump. The way the media is trying to present him now is they're trying to, everything that he touched, they're trying to say that it was toxic, that he was a bad person, he was a racist, he was that. So I think that looking ahead, it's going to be extremely hard to get anything named after him.
Yes, it will.
I think one of the reasons why they wanted to impeach and convict, you have all these businesses that are saying, we don't want to do business with him. And it's like, wait a minute. You have people that are in the Senate right now on the Democrat side, really both sides, that have tarnished records. Look at Eric Swalwell. He's supposed to be an impeachment manager, and he's embroiled in this whole China thing, but no one is saying anything about it because the media is in control. They are the propaganda machine of the Democrats. So it will be extremely hard. I mean, it might not happen for like 2 decades to get anything named or get his name on something to recognize the contribution that he gave to America.
The big thing really come after your death. Like Obama's had some things in Illinois and whatnot, but not a whole lot of big things. But he'll ultimately have big things named after him. And in my judgment, you go through the metrics, very, very unremarkable. Maybe it's an overstatement to say a failed president, but not a successful president. I mean, we were in conflict abroad. ISIS rose on his watch. Never had 3% GDP growth in even 1 of 8 years. The first time that's ever happened in American history. All the outsourcing of the jobs, never confronted the China challenge, targeted the Tea Party movement and the Watergate of recent years that wasn't taken seriously enough, and was involved in Benghazi scandal and a whole bunch of other scandals. Actually, there were many, many, many more scandals.
Weaponized IRS.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And he did it in a very timely way. I mean, there's been some scholarly reports, including from universities and whatnot, that have said if the Tea Party movement had not been targeted as it was in the 2011-2012 period, that it would have been a difference maker in the Romney-Obama race. And let me tell you something that Obama knew that even people on our own side don't seem to appreciate enough. He was terrified. This guy by the name Raheem Kassad, who I've just seen referenced here, is an outstanding. I don't know him personally, but I've come to follow his work in recent months. I'm always reluctant to give my endorsement of these people who are kind of new on the scene, but I'm real impressed with what I'm seeing out of him. And National Pulse, I believe, is the name of their media outlet. And he's on War Room with Steve Bannon, which is an absolutely, whatever you think of all that, set it aside. I'm telling you, it's a good podcast, good information. But, I just, that's where we're at, I think, basically. We're going to need to unify. And if there was, again, another deficiency with Trump, it wasn't just and I say this, like, I hope he would appreciate them saying this, like, in support of him and in support if he comes back, of you always try to do something a little better the next time. And he's done that throughout his career. Well, the communications of this administration was lame. It was weak. It was completely weak. And they were up against so much. And it was weak from day one because you had people, you had people out of the RNC and whatnot who were struggling to articulate this vision that they had never really articulated before. And I'm not even sure that they were completely buying into it. And you could just see it. And you could see it, as we've talked about, in some of these court cases too, when they would send Justice Department attorneys to go argue on behalf of the government. And you could just see that they were struggling. You need to staff your administration, and particularly your communications personnel, with people who actually look at the world as you do and share your vision. And when you don't do that, you get really tepid communications efforts. And it sickened me to see the leaks of the last 4 years, including, as I mentioned to you guys before, when he was hospitalized with COVID. And then literally as he's going through impeachment proceedings in the House, they're probably the same people, scumbags, swamp scumbags leaking to Maggie Haberman and the New York Times and all the usual suspects, denouncing the president of the United States, who was responsible for their appointment. They wouldn't even be where they were if it wasn't for him and his victory and his boldness, knowing what this guy sacrificed for this country and the nonsense that he had to put up with. And you're sitting there doing that. And look, this White House, I got to just be straight up. I mean, they never figured it out, you know? And at one point I remember asking someone, it probably subsequently became untrue, but I'll ask you guys, aside from his family members, can you name in say 2019, so say before Meadows and all those changes, could you name it any White House appointee who you believe voted for Trump in the primary?
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
You don't think she voted for her dad? Or I don't know, he might have been out of the race.
He had dropped out. He was always there from the beginning, speaking on the president's behalf. And I was shocked when he made Mike Spicer made him the press secretary and not her, because I thought she was always on point. Eventually, she became the press secretary. But all the others, you're right. I can't. You know, they were even Mike Pompeo.
And you know, it's all history, so it's nothing against him personally. He's a professional, and he's very skilled, and I'm glad that he's landed at Newsmax. But you know, he denounced Trump in that primary, right? I mean, yeah. Repeatedly, you know, with all of the same sort of pejorative adjectives that we blame the left with. And
well, Michael, I will say this: out of all of them, in my opinion, you guys might disagree, I think that Mike Pompeo has been a true patriot, so it seems, to this president. I'm sorry?
Tea Party product. A lot of these,
he has been.
We got to start telling Tea Party vision better too, because like you look at Meadows, you look at Pompeo. I mean, many of these individuals, you know, owed their whole political career to their early alliance with the Tea Party movement. That's what propelled them to victory. I mean, he was a very well-known Kansas businessman, and I believe he was quite possibly the greatest Secretary of State since, what would you say?
I think, in my opinion, from what I can remember, just looking at it, I mean, he's lock and step, always there. He was the never gets the president,
and he rose to the. Look, you know, there's a lot of people to their credit, like Marco Rubio is a good example, who like historically you didn't hear much out of him on China, but he gets it now, and good for him on that. And Pompeo's another guy, like he got it on China, and that declaration of genocide against the CCP for the genocide and atrocities that they are committing against the Uyghurs was a very, very vital step that cannot be underestimated. China is engaged in genocide. That is the official position of the U.S. government. Thank you, Mike Pompeo, for that, and many other things that he did, a lot of those diplomatic breakthroughs. And, you know, he didn't back down either on a number of core issues. Sometimes things don't work out, and he kind of still navigated. And look, just to not have a major war initiated in 4 years is kind of like a new phenomenon for us as a country, right? I mean, we de-escalated, and yet he obliterated ISIS. He took out Soleimani. Donald Trump left this world more peaceful than he found it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, Michael, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. We're always honored to
do my best. Hopefully, I don't have to issue any corrections.
Come on and depart the
I really
knowledge.
Appreciate all you guys are doing. And by the way, look, MAGA. Here's my view. Like, you know, like the Tea Party movement today is different than it was in 2010 or 11. And MAGA will be different now that Trump's down in Palm Beach, but it endures, you know. And we got to hopefully, you know, continue to find opportunities to integrate the president in ways that keep his profile alive and his messaging alive, and defend him on this is what this is what we're all doing. I'm not going to allow this man's contributions to be disparaged or inaccurately represented by this administration, as they have already done in the first 24 hours of their governance. Right. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, so thanks, Michael, for coming on with us again. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Talk soon.
To all of our fans and listeners, thank you. Please share the replay of this, and we will be back on again on Sunday. Looking forward to have you there and share our replay. Thank you so much. Good night.
Oh, and be sure to check us out on pill.net and sign up to that site.
.net.
Great.
Absolutely. We're there also.
Social media site. You can send messages on there and tons of podcasts, all kinds of stuff. So be sure to support and sign up for pill.net and watch us on there as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you and have a good night.